This is Rish Outfield. I'm going to take advantage of the last of the winter snow, and I'm going to share with you a story of mine called Rest Stop. The sun was going down in the distance, and I could see lovely pink light just over the hills. As I drove, I admired the heavy shadows the pine trees made on the road in front of me. The gray snow piled 1.5 feet along each side. Wyoming was beautiful, even in January, but I'd be happy to be out of it and on my way to Montana, where Geronimo and I would be starting our new life. I patted the dog in question, sitting in the passenger spot of my pickup truck, her black fur tensing when I touched her. Yeah, she was a girl dog, so it should have been Sacagawea or Pocahontas or something. The girl Indian in Peter Pan, maybe. But Geronimo had been the name of her daddy, and he had been my companion for 9 years. My good dog. Our good dog, yes. But I had already begun to think of Carolina as a separate entity from me, and ex instead of wife. And it had incensed her that I'd started calling the new dog Geronimo when I'd picked her up from the breeders, when I only did it by accident. New dog had looked so much like our old one, albeit with more black than brown in her coat, that I could be forgiven for making that mistake a time or two. But Carolina couldn't forgive it. She took it personally, as though I didn't mourn our good, loyal German Shepherd and was eager to replace him with a duplicate, which is, I suppose, what I'd done. I didn't think that contributed to the divorce, since we were barely holding on when Geronimo I got run over, and lasted 2 days in agony before we put him down. But our dog had been like a kid to us, keeping us together when we were drifting apart, and once that kid was gone, the drifting sped up. We just wanted different things, Carolina and me. She was educated and wanted to be an editor in publishing somewhere, and I was happy to bartend in a honky-tonk on the weekends and do woodworking at Cassidy's fine town furnishings during the week. Carolina wanted to live in the city, one a heck of a lot bigger than Boise, and I wanted to live in the country, somewhere rural and private, like my pretty darn blissful childhood had been. Carolina never wanted to have kids, and hated organized religion with the fiery passion of a red-headed woman, though hers came out of a bottle. Me, I kind of enjoyed going to church. I liked the songs and seeing the kids all dressed up and sitting on a pew, trying so hard to stay still and quiet, and I wanted to call one of those kids my own someday. And maybe I'd get a chance to father a child now. The papers were signed, and we'd be divorced soon enough. And though I only got together with one woman since our breakup, a waitress named Jessica at the Elksman Bar and Grill, whose blonde hair definitely did not come from a bottle. When Carolina got wind of it, she insisted I'd been unfaithful our whole marriage and poisoned my relations with her family and my friends. So it was time to move on. Out to Sierra, Montana, where my uncle had a ranch. I was going to fix it up, sell woodwork out of the barn, and start my life over again. As soon as I got out of Wyoming, that is. You may wonder, why was I in Wyoming if my destination was Montana? Well, I didn't know either. I'd made a wrong turn fairly early in my drive, and when I caught it, noting a sign pointing the way to Fort Bridger and Rock Springs, I just kept driving. It was winter, but it wasn't horribly cold today, and I felt I needed time to think. So I drove south on Highway 30, then east on I-80, and eventually headed north again, once I found what looked like a major road. That had been 4 hours ago, and only now that night was on its way did I realize I was a dumbass. But I'd been enjoying the music, Pure Country 101.5, they called themselves, and the sun had been warm on my face and arm, and the truck had always been comfortable. Now it would be very late indeed when I got to my destination, if I didn't choose to crash at a motel along the way instead. Depended on how tired I got, and if the radio station faded. We'd see. Geronimo made an interrogative sound and sat up. "Nope, not there yet, girl," I said, scratching her between the ears the way she liked. Her old man had liked it too. But the dog was awake now, and turned to look at the woods out the window, a noise almost like a whimper in her throat. I knew that noise. Her daddy would have barked twice, letting me or Carolina know he needed to go outside. This dog whined instead. "Hey, girl, we'll stop sometime soon," I promised. Nothing but forest here, and no real place to take a leisurely pee. We passed a sign, but it was a warning about icy roads rather than info about a rest area. "We'll find a place, girl." But Geronimo whined again. And then she did bark, 3 times instead of 2. I smiled. "When you gotta go." "Okay, baby," I said, and patted her on the haunches. "Next place we see." But none came. The plows had piled up snow too close to the side of the road, so it would be crazy to pull over here. But there was a long stretch up ahead, and I could see a sign that looked like it would help us. I slowed as we approached it, but it was covered over in frozen snow, obscuring all but the word miles. Just beyond the sign, the plows had done a better job, pushing the snow well off the road, so you could stop if you had to, just off the highway. I pulled the pickup over, meaning to stay inside, but left her idling, and got out with the dog to check on the bed of the truck. All my worldly belongings were strapped there, which didn't amount to much. I'd sold almost everything the last weekend, and I'd always been a bit simple in necessities anyway. They were covered by a thick blue tarp, which hadn't shifted in the drive, though it did have a layer of snow on it from when I'd passed out of Idaho. It had gotten colder since I stopped for gas and a chicken sandwich. Once the sun set, it would really get chilly, and I again berated myself for driving so far out of my way, and for no good reason. Just then, Geronimo perked up her ears and began to run through the snow toward the woods. "Not too far, girl," I began, then cursed myself again as she leapt a snowbank and kept running, as though chasing a tennis ball or a chipmunk. "Jero, come back here," I yelled in the angry master voice that always got my previous dog's tail between his legs. This shout had no effect, and I stood there, alone beside my idling truck, feeling stupid. I clapped my hands roughly. "Geronimo, get your mangy butt back here!" In response, I heard the dog bark once. She wanted to play? I looked around me, as though someone might see me deliberating, feeling brainless when I had no real reason to. I whistled once, adding the dog's name to it, and got no response. I called my female dog a word for a female dog, and started over the snow as well. The dog's paw prints were easy to follow, and the snow was pretty pristine, so I had no trouble tracking her, even as she had gone 50 yards, 100 yards, farther away from the road. "Jero!" I shouted as I looked behind me, and saw my pickup truck, neglected and vulnerable way back there now. No cars passed by, but it would only take one, noticing it sitting unattended, with the engine running. "I'm going to turn around and leave you," I called, but I didn't think I'd ever do that. More likely, I'd sit in the truck stewing until she came back. "There's probably bears in these woods," I said loudly, but she couldn't have heard me. I looked down at my shoes, half sunken in the snow, and I had no choice but to chuckle. I remember Carolina asking me if I could imagine what having a teenager would be like, having him, or her, deliberately do the opposite of whatever I urged him to do, just to be contrary. This was one of those, what did you call them? Microcosms. A small example of what that would be like. would have been like.
The dog barked again, and I realized she was just ahead, behind a stand of trees. Grumbling, I walked on, passing through the shade of an evergreen the size of a radio tower, and then into the clearing beyond.
There was a woman standing there. I started, making a tiny sound that was anything but manly. The woman was middle-aged, slim, and completely still. She wore shapeless brown clothing, old-fashioned or like a religious cult would wear, and my first assessment was that I was looking at a wax sculpture or a carving of a person. The eyes seemed to be looking, staring right at me, but I guess I was just at the right angle for it to appear that way. It was standing several yards away beside a dead tree and didn't seem to be alive. My God, I thought, she's a taxidermied person. A stuffed corpse propped up out here like some kind of morbid decoration. Then the woman blinked. My dog was standing in front of her, looking with what appeared to be confusion. The woman's head tilted ever so slightly in Geronimo's direction. The dog made a little whining noise and sat. That dog never sat for anybody, something Carolina always complained about. In the year that we'd had her, I hadn't gotten her to do much other than come and speak. But now, in front of this strange, still woman, her eyes moved, bird-like, back to my face. Hello? Had she spoken? Was someone else around, saying something? I swallowed, deciding it had been the wind. What is thy name? Okay, that was definitely a voice. Though it wasn't coming from the woman, it was coming from myself. But thy instead of your? Jord, I mumbled, then clarifying. Jordan. And a lively Alsatian. What? Thou art lively too. To come all this way, my visitors are few. Though she wasn't speaking, I somehow understood this woman was communicating with me, whispering in my ear as though I had an earpiece in, or she was right behind me, leaning just over my shoulder. I got a picture from the woman, a sense of great age, like a huge gnarled tree that had been young before any world wars, before slaves were free. But it was all inside the woman, nothing apparent from her face. And those eyes, they did look like the eyes of a stuffed museum specimen, a stuffed person. I needed to get out of there. Jer, I started to say, but my voice faltered, failed. Did I really want to talk right now, when I could get moving? This was that flight or fight instinct that came over animals, and my whole being was shouting, run! Come on, Jaron, I whispered. My voice was not functioning right. My throat didn't work anymore. No, stay. Thou needest to tarry a while. My dog hadn't left her side. I was going to have to leave the animal, just go, get back to the truck and drive away. I would mourn this one like I did her daddy. The dog gazed back at me, her eyes big and shiny. I couldn't just leave her, could I? She was helpless out here. I looked back at the strange woman, the dead woman. She was closer now to me, 3 or 4 yards closer, but she hadn't taken any steps. Her feet were still planted atop the snow there. Atop. There were no tracks around her except the dog's. Stay. Know me, the voice said, and I looked at the woman's pale, corpse face, and she opened her mouth. Her tongue began to loll, and it kept on coming, as though it wasn't attached to her at all. The tongue was rolling around in the air outside her mouth. I was the one that was helpless out here, not the dog. I had to get out, had to run, had to. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from that dead face and live, writhing tongue. No! I screamed. Or maybe I only thought it. There was a stinging pain in my fingers. Geronimo barked beside me, almost a frantic sound. I looked down to see nothing. It was dark, almost pitch black dark. I was standing there, in the woods, and it was nighttime. I had undone my pants out here to have a pee, and then I had drifted off. The woman, the tongue, passed out? Passed out, standing up. I heard someone say, a weak, shuddering, pathetic sound. It was me. My teeth were chattering, my ears and nose ached, and there were stars in the sky above me. Something bit my fingers and I winced, pulling my hands up together like I was begging or praying. They were like ice. Something large brushed against my leg and barked. "Jero?" I asked in a high, quavering voice. I could see the whites of his eyes and the one light patch on his tail in the dark. What happened, boy?" The dog barked once. He wanted to play? What were we doing out here? I took a step and found my toes were so cold as to hurt when I put weight on them. The dog barked again, and he brushed me again. "Boy?" Wait, this wasn't Geronimo, my dog, but the other one, the second one. How did I get here? What was happening to me? The dog kept barking and started moving away, leaving me. I didn't want to be left alone. Stay longer. My dog would be out of sight in a moment, just me there in the dark. So I followed her. It was hard walking through the ice and snow and bushes, not seeing much now, just occasional lighter shadow among the black. It hurt to walk. My fingers, toes, ears, and nose felt frozen, smashed in a door. The only part of me that wasn't cold was... I swallowed, putting it out of my mind. I was lost in the woods, and my cell phone was... It was still in the truck, in its hands-free perch. Not that it was likely to get service out here. Where was I? I was lost, and I was going to die out here. Terry. But maybe not alone. Jero barked twice up ahead. I couldn't see her anymore, and I moved as fast as I could to catch up. I tripped in the dark, catching myself with my numb, stinging hands. It felt like I had landed on broken glass, face down in hard, icy snow. I heard a whimpering sound and hoped the dog was all right, but that whimper had come from me. I needed to collect my strength, rest up a tiny bit. I would lay here for just a moment, and then I'd try to get up. Just a minute at the very most. Geronimo barked again. I heard her moving through the snowy ground toward me. It was too dark there to see anything, even my dog, but then a hot, wet tongue began lapping my forehead, and it was so blessedly warm I thought of another tongue, a worm-like protuberance squirming from a dead mouth, like an eel leaving a cave. My body tensed up. I couldn't lay there anymore. I had to get up, get moving, or I was dead. Or worse. Geronimo barked twice more. "I know, boy," I sputtered. "I'm coming." But it was so hard to rise to my knees that I nearly gave up. Just a little rest to gather some energy, but I saw the white of the snow by my face and the dark spots where my hand had struck, and I recognized it as blood. I couldn't even feel my hands anymore, despite the shuddering pain from only a moment before. Had it been a moment? The moment I wanted to rest there, rest my body, rest my eyes? Rotten flesh, mottled with mold, mottled with crusted filth, my bare skin against it. I gasped. I had to rise, get up on my feet, had to do it now. Jero barked again as I strained, knelt, and pushed myself to a standing position. The dark world lit up with white flashes, and I nearly toppled over again. Suddenly, the dog was at my side, panting, just like she wanted to play frisbee or chase a rubber ball. Okay, I whispered, and followed the dog into the dark once again. Ice-covered tree branches scraped at me, and I stumbled over a rock. But then the tree line ended, and down below us, I could see light, flashing yellow light, and a beeping sound, like a garbage truck backing up. The dog barked and ran toward it. I staggered, then forced myself to run as well. I was at the road once again, where I had left my truck, my phone, everything I owned other than my dog. I managed to climb up over the ridge and saw the source of the yellow light. A tow truck was parked behind my pickup and was in the process of lifting it up off the ground. I moved, nearly out of breath, to his driver's window and knocked on it, but my cold fingers could hardly knock, only managing to slap against the glass. The driver, a big, bearded old man, started, flailing his hands in the air like I'd doused him with ice water. He got hold of himself and rolled down his window. "Don't take it," I said, though my quivering jaw made the words vibrate and string together. "It's my truck."
What, the old man stammered. Where'd you come from?
I chased my dog into the woods. I got out. I got lost.
The truck was just left here, engine running, keys in the ignition, the tow truck driver said, as if explaining his actions.
I know. I'm sorry.
The man pressed a button on his dash.
Please, I said. I was...
Lordy, you're shaking. How long you been out there?
I don't know. It was light, and then...
Stay with me.
I got the call 45 minutes back, mister. It's...
He shuddered, then flipped a switch, and my truck began to lower again. I went up to the pickup, opened my passenger door, got the blanket from on the back seat, and wrapped myself with it. It was blessedly warm. I slapped the seat with my palm, wincing at the pain. "Up, Jero!" My dog leapt up into the truck, and I closed the door on her. The tow truck driver got out of his vehicle and spent a minute unhooking my pickup from his truck. I walked over to him, almost stumbling.
Got a call about an abandoned car, he told me again, and I figured I knew where they were talking about. Found your truck here, still warm inside, still running fine.
He looked at me and swallowed.
They sent the place to go wandering.
The old man had on the world's dirtiest Broncos cap, but I had seen worse. I kept fighting the impulse to look behind me into the forest, afraid I'd see someone creeping closer over the gray snow.
Terry.
But it was just trees and snow, bathed in orange light from the yellow flashers on his roof and the red brake lights. Even so, I wanted to get out of there. I was sure the old-timer would still charge me, even though he'd towed me nowhere, but I didn't care what it cost. I wanted to be gone, down the road, headed for my new start in Montana, though I knew I'd be checking my rearview mirror like a teenager in a stolen car.
You're real lucky, you know that?
He said, when he'd racked the chain back onto his winch. My hands were still aching from the cold, and I kept seeing glimpses of horror in the woods. A woman who had been living there for decades, even if she'd died centuries ago.
Know me.
I don't feel lucky, I muttered. The old man grunted, and I don't know if that meant he'd heard me or not. I glanced back at the trees, and for just a moment, I thought I saw her there, arms outstretched, having peeled off her moth-worn shift. But it was nothing. Maybe a bird.
Why would you stop here of all places?
The tow truck man wondered. Dog wanted to stop. I didn't know where else I'd get a chance.
Didn't you read the sign?
Sign? The old man grabbed my arm with gloved fingers. I stiffened at his touch. He marched me just a few yards past his tow truck to the sign right outside the road.
Oh,
he said when he saw the snow covering it.
God damn it.
Look, I don't, I began, meaning to tell him I didn't want to be rude, but I had a long drive ahead of me and really wanted to be on my way. What's more, I needed to be on my way, which is almost the same thing, but not quite. But he reached up above his head. How did that much snow pile up on a thin metal sign anyway? And gave the tin a hard slap with his gloved hand. The loud bell toll sound did send a bird flying from one of the pines nearby. I had to admit that I was startled as well, but hopefully I can be forgiven. Some of the snow turned out to be ice, but most of it fell onto the ground. The old man took a step back, shining the light he had on his keychain up at the sign. I stepped around it and looked up at it. Absolutely no stopping. Rest area ahead, 1.5 miles.
You see it now?
He asked, though I was standing right beside it. Yeah, I said anyway. The end.